When you have an opportunity as a journalist to look under a rock and expose true motivations behind something that otherwise would have remained secret, I think that's significant and important to the public.
The traffic jam started on Monday the 9th. We didn't really hear about this until Wednesday the 11th, from when the first email came through, and we ignored it largely because traffic jams are not that big a deal. By Thursday the 12th, however, there were more, including an email from the publisher alerting us to this and the fact that some of his friends had been caught in these terrible jams.
We started making inquiries and we got these really odd answers from the Port Authority. Very terse, few details, and mostly silence, which raised an obvious question. If this is a traffic study, why are you afraid to talk about it? So what you had in October, November, and December was a steady trickle of news stories that raised more questions. For example, the Port Authority's executive director, Pat Foy's email, an internal email was leaked to the media that showed that he was outraged about these lane closures and that he knew nothing about them. This is the top executive of this agency claiming in an email, not only did he not know anything about this operational change, which was so disruptive, he called it potentially illegal. Nothing like this has happened. It broke with protocol. And what they did was they pinned the blame squarely on a Christie appointee at the Port Authority, a man named David Wildstein.
David Wildstein was a Christie appointee at the Port Authority. He went to high school with the governor in Livingston. Christie has claimed that they were not close friends, that it wasn't his decision to put Wildstein at the Port Authority. It was Bill Baroni, another Christie appointee at the agency, who wanted David there. Inside this agency, he was known as a fierce ally of the governor, implementing the governor's policy agenda, and an enforcer of sorts. At least that's how he was viewed. At the time of the lane closures, we now know that he directed this operation. He went there on the first morning at 6 a.m. to see the results of this lane reconfiguration. The first huge news break here came from a document that was provided by David Wildstein to the state legislature in response to a subpoena. And what we found out was that a deputy chief of staff in Christie's office sent David Wildstein an email that said, "Time for traffic problems in Fort Lee." Wildstein responds, "Got it." The inference being that they had some previous conversation or agreement as to what the operation would look like. They weren't talking about a traffic study. They were talking about traffic problems. Bridget Kelly was a deputy chief of staff to the governor. She's someone who was involved in Republican Party politics in Bergen County, and she kind of worked her way up. She was someone that Christie staff said that they trusted. That when she said she wasn't involved in the lane closures, they had asked her several times, that they believed her, and they also were shocked by her email.
They turned this into a political event. This was far more serious than that. This reminded me to some extent of what happened in Watergate. To think that somebody would trivialize the problem of getting to school on time, to getting to your job on time, for police getting to an accident on time, for ambulances responding to people who are maybe near death. It's just outrageous.
When Sean Boberg's story hit the website and the paper, it was like an earthquake had hit. The Christie political universe had now was cratering. That this was something that was going to change everything about his career. It just seemed like the Chris Christie who was impervious to any kind of political problems, scandal, any kind of political trouble, that was all out the window now.
When Sean's story broke online on January 8th, I was on my way down to an event with the governor in Stafford Township. Before Sean's story broke, the administration had denied they had any involvement in the lane closures. When Governor Christie was asked about it numerous times, he said that it was a traffic study, which was what the Port Authority officials had been saying up until that point. And he even joked at one point that he put the cones out himself, a remark he later apologized for. I was going to the event knowing this story was coming, hoping to talk to Christie about it if I could get the chance to do so. And I was a little disappointed when he didn't show up, but part of me didn't expect him to attend the event. The day after Sean's story broke, the governor called a news conference. It was January 9th. I had never seen the kind of turnout for a Christie State House press conference that I saw that day.
That I do not know.
Christie press conference normally draws a significant amount of press attention. So it's not unusual to see camera crews huddled around the governor's door waiting to be admitted. But when I came down those steps that day, there was no huddles. It was a throng that went all the way out to West State Street, right to the main entrance. It was not your typical New Jersey, New York metropolitan media. The nationals were here. It's
the most contrite I've ever seen him. He was apologetic. He told us that he had fired his deputy chief of staff, who had sent the now infamous email, "Time for some traffic problems in Fort Lee," and he spent 2 hours fielding questions. And not once did he really, raise his voice or get angry at us, which is kind of the response we're used to when we're asking him confrontational questions.
And I come out here today to apologize to the people of New Jersey. I apologize to the people of Fort Lee, and I apologize to the members of the state legislature.
He strived to show that he was taking a strong leadership position by taking immediate action. So Bridget Ann Kelly was fired shortly after. He said that she had lied to him when he had asked about this, leading up to the release of the emails. He also cut ties with Bill Stepien, a very close, long-time political advisor to the governor. This sort of move with a close ally spoke volumes about his suspicions.
So immediately following the news conference the governor held, he kind of went into a media blackout. He called it an immediate internal investigation and hired attorneys to look into his office. They produced a report in, I think it was late March, that exonerated the governor. It put most of the blame on Bridget Kelly and David Wildstein. It also questioned Bill Stepien's involvement, though it didn't have any conclusive information that he was involved.
Shortly after Wildstein's email with Bridget Ann Kelly surfaced, he was scheduled to testify before the legislature under oath. He showed up with his attorney, and we had one of the most dramatic, iconic moments of this scandal when David Wildstein was sworn in but refused to answer all questions, including where he worked, which everyone in the room knew the answer to.
On the advice of counsel, I assert my right to remain silent.
Before the scandal broke, Governor Christie had just come off of a landslide victory in November. He was seen as really the top candidate, or one of the top candidates, for the GOP nomination for president in 2016. Was kind of riding high. He's chairman of the Republican Governors Association this year. There's 36 gubernatorial races, so he's traveling the country raising money for these candidates and campaigning with them. And it was a position that really put him in line to have a national network should he run in 2016. And then the scandal broke, and his popularity quickly dropped.
And I also think it fed this kind of narrative about Christie as an aggressive bully. And now we have potential evidence that reinforced that image.
People began questioning his viability as a candidate. He seems to have recovered a lot. Some of the polls still show him as one of the top contenders. He's been out there reassuring donors that he has no connection to this, that he's held the people accountable for their actions, and he's moving forward. So, Christie, I think, still sees himself as a viable candidate and still says he's considering running.
I know Christie would like to project the image that this has moved off to sea and it's in this past. It's a little kind of a blot on his resume, but the story is not over. We don't really know what happened. It still remains an unsolved mystery, and I think it's going to be a mystery that some of the federal investigators are going to have to untangle.